Good day everyone and welcome to another vlog. In today's vlog we get to continue with this little snake, oh yeah, and a few other things actually. But I wanted to start off with just a little bit of a reminder on how this looked last week. Now obviously you've seen the thumbnail, but as you can see the eyes and all that kind of stuff, if you saw this thing, I don't think you would be scared. I think you would pretty much just grab a stick and go to town. But it needed to be made fiercer. The kink in the neck needed to be sorted out. And I told you guys I was going to try to re-rig it because that was what I felt led to at least try. Led to do. So I tried re-rigging it, by adding new bones, or I think I used the same bones. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, it did not work. The kink was still there. It lay down flatter. It did, really did. But honestly and truly, it just did not work. So let me just quickly run through the animations from the previous one and show you the latest one from this week. Okay, so as you can see, this is the black snake. Looks fiercer than the other one. Having said that, it's exactly the same one. So next video. So this is the one I opened up with, frame from this animation. Not very fierce. A little bit of an issue there with the kink, but and the tail doesn't go through the ground. But for the animation from this week, I went a little further with the transformation, and God helped me fix the kink, and I will talk about that when I show you the video. So here is this week's video. You can see it fades from green, the eyes are more fierce, and of course there's a dissolve. Now the dissolve is for when the snake gets swallowed. I'm using the build modifier to do this. As you can see, the neck doesn't kink as badly as it did last week. There is still a kink, there absolutely is, but it's a lot less than it was. Like I said, the dissolve is for when it gets eaten. You use the build modifier for that. I'll put a link in the description for the tutorial where I learned how to do that. I actually came across that tutorial absolutely by divine leading, I'm telling you, because I wanted to use transparency as the snake gets swallowed to make it invisible. But the problem is Freestyle does not consider your textures. It only uses geometry. So it was absolutely not an option, not even remotely an option. Well, speaking of things that transform and dissolve, thankfully Aaron does not dissolve, but I did an animation over the weekend, if I remember correctly, of Aaron throwing his the rod forward so that it can turn into the serpent thing, and there'll be the face off and all that kind of stuff. So this is Aaron throwing it. Woo! There it goes. Now you might think I actually used physics for this, but I did not. I used I tried using physics, and I'll show you what that looks like in terms of how it works. But for this one, I went with the rod being parented to his hand, the hand bone, so that he can bring it from the back to the front as he throws it, and then it has to release and be tied to something else as it is thrown, and I used an empty for that. So it literally transitions from the hand to the empty as it goes. So it's quite a tricky thing to get the animation to be seamless, like you can see right here. So this looks a lot fancier than it actually is. The rod is about a rod and a half's length away from Aaron, so this looks a lot more dramatic than it is. Having said that, this is not the way I think he threw it. I just made it like this because it would look cool for the test. I think he would just have pretty much, thrown it. We usually call it underarm if you translate it directly, referring to the curve of your arm is not going over your head, it's going in a curve that almost looks like a smile. So I think you just pretty much threw it forward like that. It may have bounced because the bottom would have hit the floor, and then it would have did that rattle type thing instead of bouncing like this. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So let me show you how I got to test it. So this is the project. I just want to turn Aaron off. Okie dokie. I just want to turn off this one because that one does not use the physics in a very cool way. So I just want to work with this right now. Okay. So the important thing with physics is that you animate its release. So if you go into physics, you can see that if you use rigid body, you can have an active body and you can tick animated or not. So I think I have tried this before where I tried to use animated momentum to carry forward a physics animation or simulation. Simulation is a better word. Ignore this mass thing. It didn't make any visual difference that I could tell. I think I tried this before, but I don't remember whether it worked or not. But it certainly does carry on the momentum. So what I did was I used an empty and a Suzanne monkey to generate momentum. And of course, this one will be the one getting momentumed. So you can check this out. Amazing. So if you were to look at it from this angle, you can see that it works beautifully. No jerking or anything like that. And I believe the reason that it works well is because the physics got baked under the scene settings. Because what would happen when I tried this initially is that on release, it would not just go nice and, go. It would first pop one frame further and then back and continue. So the momentum still carried on, but you had a very weird jerking motion right there at the release point. Whereas this one just, boom, there it goes. So I might try this again for Aaron, like just using the physics. But just a heads up, if you have a make human character visible while you're using the physics, I'm not talking about, after baking. I'm talking about pre-baking when you're trying to run the simulation and doing tests and all that kind of stuff. Make sure that your make human character is not visible because for some reason it breaks the physics from working. I don't know why this is. It may be a bug. I don't know why. But whenever I tried to do the physics animation with Aaron in the scene, it failed. It failed every single time. It's like the physics disappear completely. They disappear completely. And at the point where it's supposed to activate, it fails. It's like it's like the code evaporates. It's weird. It's really weird. So just a heads up, bake your physics. Make sure your physics objects do not contain, I think it applies to any rig, not just the make human rig. But you can still have some objects related to the rig. You just can't have the rig visible when you're doing the physics. So now you know. Anyway, let's move on to the next one, which is the palm tree. Oh yeah. So here is a palm tree verse image I made like the 14th of May of last year. That's not necessarily the publishing date on the Cross Allegiance Facebook page, link in the description. But it really does help a lot when you have old assets that you can reuse. So this first image simply reads, on the next day, much people that were come to the feast. This is Passover. When they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, they took branches of palm trees and went forth to meet him and cried, Hosanna, blessed is the King of Israel that cometh in the name of the Lord, which is, I just wish I could have seen that. That would have been so awesome. But you know what? I like technology. I think God placed me in this time and space for a very specific reason. You can also see the scripture reference that actually confirms that on screen as well at the moment. And I don't think I would have done well in that time. If God put me there, then yes, I would have done well, because he would have been with me in that time. So anyway, let me show you the approach to making the palm tree. Okay, so this was just the palm tree branch rendered out so that I can use it for a texture. I noticed that the detail was far too high to actually have it physically modeled and animated. It's just insane. It really is. So God led me to add the particle that creates these little blades over here on the stem. And of course, thicken this out because it has to lock into the tree with quite a bit of thickness, and render it out. And this little piece being in the render as well enables me to fill in this little space over here with a few little blades as well. So this would be the modified one that is set and ready for texturing. It does have a transparent background so that the alpha can be directly taken from the image. Having said that, I still used a manual alpha because of this. It's way too thin. It looks almost like hair. As you can see, this is just a plane with a texture applied to it. And of course, it is a little bit bent and stuff so that the leaves aren't like super stiff and flat. And there we have a better one, nice and thick. Now this is the exact same texture, just added a color ramp and increased the alpha, or decreased the amount of alpha per image, in the sense that the anti-aliasing was used to make it thicker, the leaves thicker. And this was after adding some detail to the trunk, as well as a procedural texture for the trunk over there. This was obviously adding some reception of transparent shadows. And this is what it looked like on a plane with some texture added as well. And this was added as particles. Now, by this point, I made 3 different trees. The only thing that kind of bothers me about this is the fact that I couldn't rotate them along the global z-axis. The reason I couldn't is because the trees were modeled standing up. Now, that would be a logical choice when you model something, but you have to have things modeled pointing along the x-axis for them to stand up in the particle system for some reason. I don't know why. But the only benefit to that is that you can rotate your objects along the z-axis, giving you a much more random look than we have right here, because you can see these 3 trees are exactly the same tree. And you can see that these 2 are exactly the same. These 2 are exactly the same. These 2 are exactly the same. So at first glance, you don't really notice it, but if you really look at the image, you can start to see this is a particle system. Having said that, the more you add, the less you see it. Boom. Oh yeah. Now, this is not the final render. This is probably what the final trees will look like in the scene, because they will get some level of ambient occlusion. This is what it looks like without the ambient occlusion. I prefer it with. Just not as dark, but I really like the added level of contrast. So I want to show you something else, which is the animation for the palm trees. Now, as you can see over here, it's moving a little bit. What I did was I used a very, very, very simple rig. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 bones, possibly a little bit more just to add a little bit more flexibility. And of course, I used slow parenting to add a little bit of flex to the leaves. You can see it the clearest on this little branch over here as it moves the slowest, facing the camera, of course, or pointing to the camera, better way of phrasing it. But I took it a lot further than this. So I want to show you what this looks like in the particle system, and then I want to show you a very cool thing that God led me to do after that. So this is what they look like in a group context. As you can see, it looks pretty cool. I'm very satisfied with this. The only thing that bothers me is the Z transparency little line over there, but it is so not obvious that I don't think anyone would really care that it's there. The higher the resolution is, the less you see it. Seriously. And the more compositing and other stuff that you add to it, it just evaporates. It really does. So I'm not even going to struggle with that. Having said that, I do want to show you guys a benefit of the feature that gets rid of this little line after I showed you the next video, which is the most awesome thing God showed me this week in terms of the palm trees. The small animation. Now, ironically, the small animation is something that you would see first with palm trees because the blades are a lot lighter than the bigger branches are. So it would take the small blades being blown quite significantly for it to affect the whole tree to start swaying and all that kind of stuff, because it acts almost like a net, you know. A net, is that a sail? It acts like a sail, not a net. It looks like a net, but it acts like a sail. Okay, so the way this was done was just by using displacement, and the displacement only affects the leafy part, the blade part. It does not affect the spine of the branches. You can see that over here. You can see that the spines are almost 100% still. There's a slight transitional thing going on there, but they're almost 100% stable. This is so cool. I'm so thankful for this. I want to show you what the actual project looks like. And I also want to show you that little trick that gets rid of that C transparency line. Now you can't see it in here because I don't have any anti-aliasing turned on. This is just a test render to make sure that it works. But this is the one that also contains the displacement that I just showed you guys. So you can see it's just a simple displacement one. And on the primary tree, I added the control for that displacement. So you can make it like come in progressively and go out and that sort of thing. So you can see in this one also that I flipped the trees back right side up, but it does not make a difference to your particle system. You would have to apply the rotation or do it in edit mode for it to work. So I'm just sticking with what I got, which is this. And I'm very thankful for it. Very, very thankful for it. So you can see the animation as it moves, just like that. It looks almost like water. Weird water. So if you look closely, you can see that the spine is also static in this situation. Just want to get a better angle. There's the spine going there. And in here in the middle. Okay, so what I wanted to show you guys was that Blender Render can actually see through geometry by textures. Now, the only way to do that is to use anti-aliasing full sample. So if you tick full sample, and I'm going to show you first without full sample, so we don't waste time here. Okay, so as you can see here in the depth pass, this is pretty much all you'll see. You won't be able to see through things, which makes your Z-pass to use it for, how do you phrase this, a mist type of effect. You can't get that with this result unless you blur the Z-pass quite significantly. But if you tick full sample, this is just, if you just tick full sample and you still have Z transparency active, this is what you would get in the Z-pass. Boom. See, now you can see through the leaf texture over there. Now this does have limitations. As you can see over here, it still considers the geometry. You can see through it, but it still considers the depth of the geometry that you used. You can also see it over here. You can't see any leaf texture in this area. It's only over the transparent sky areas. Now, there's also another snag to this, and that is that it's either completely transparent or it is not transparent at all. So don't focus on getting like really, really smooth transparency and expecting this to give you that smooth transparency. It will not. It really will not. So don't worry about that. And next up, we have some wheat. Well, technically, it's not really wheat. It's barley, but it looks a lot like wheat. I've noticed that having it as a full 3D model looks amazing. But when you try to render it as a full 3D model, the render times and the strain is not so awesome. So what I want to do is, and this is what I feel led to do, is to use something along the lines of Boyd particles, where you would have a plane that's always facing the camera, and instead of having, let's see how much the geometry is. Let's check the project. So we have how many vertices? One has 1,162 vertices. Now it will go from 1,662 to 4. Quite a significant amount. You can really add a lot more to that. Now you also have to remember that this includes the Z transparency, so you have to consider that as well. But for the amount of barley that has to be in the scene, we're talking about feeding a country here. We're not talking about just growing your own food, that sort of thing. That's small compared to what is actually needed here. What I would like to do is I would still like to use the physical stalks on the outer edges of the fields. For example, let's say this is a single patch, and you would have like, say, 20 or so patches per field. And if you were to put the physical stalks around the edges and the billboard particles on the inside, you can still get a very nice result. Having said that, I don't know if that's what God wants me to do. It's something that has to be tested. The goal is to get the render times as low as possible, get the result to look as great as possible, and get it done. An interesting thing, though, is when I went to look at the actual chapter to find out about what was struck and what was not, because I remembered something was not struck, and I believe that was the Holy Spirit leading me, because it gave me discount in terms of what needed to be modeled. It says in Exodus 9 verses 31 and 32, it says, "And the flax and the barley was smitten," this is talking about the plague of the hail, "for the barley was in the ear and the flax was bolled." Now, flax being bolled means that it is it's had its flowers, and its flowers are dying off, so it leaves it with seed pods. So there may still be some flowers, but since it was struck down, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, but it says that the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up, which means they were sown at pretty much the same time. But the flax and the barley were sown at the same time. From a little bit of research that I did, you can pretty much plant them about a month or two apart, depending on the type of wheat or barley, whatever that it is that you're using, and the climate that you're planting it in. So it's very possible for the climate of Egypt at the time it was a lot more tropical than desert, if I'm not mistaken. The wheat and the rye would not have even broken soil at the time of the hail plague. It's very likely that they wouldn't have even broken soil. So that was interesting. That was very interesting. So that gave me discount in terms of modeling the wheat and the rye. Having said that, the barley, the wheat and the rye pretty much look identical. They really look identical. Now, I know that there are some physical properties in the sense that some are more bulky than others, but if you just looked at it individually, you'll pretty much call it all wheat, unless you're like an expert at this sort of thing. So I want to show you guys another thing for this week. I was led to watch some of BornCG's videos this week. He publishes one, I think, every week. He did one on walk cycles. Now, I watch beginner tutorials all the time because there are always hidden tips and hints in there that I don't know. Yay for humility. God is so awesome. And he insisted that I watch his tutorials this week. And one thing that he showed that I didn't know at all was the NLA Editor. Now, I knew of its existence because I did a sound tutorial that required it, but I didn't know how to use it at all. Now, I'm still struggling to, get the grasp of how this thing works properly. So I'll link the tutorial in the description. So let's say we want to do an animation. So I'm just going to make a new project. And we want to, do a walk cycle, and we want the character to stand still and all that kind of stuff. You would need some sort of editor to make all these things fit together. So the NLA editor is like the video sequence editor, but for animation, for actions. It's a lot like the game engine, but for final animation. So let's add an action to this Suzanne little monkey over here, and let's make her bounce. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so let's say we're happy with this. This is our first action. Let's pretend that this is our loop cycle. Loop cycle. Walk cycle. So let's call this as Suzanne bounce. Now this is in the dope sheet. I clicked rather fast there. Dope sheet, action editor instead of dope sheet. So I'm happy with this. Let's give it a fake user so that Blender doesn't just delete it if it's not used by anything else. And let's clear that. So if you click back, she's still in that position over there. So let's add a new action and call this flying. So we want her to start back here where she was. So now we have two actions. We have flying and we have bounce. Just want to add a fake user there. So now if you want to just take that out. So now if you go into the NLA editor, and just get that, you can see flying is already imported, but we need to add another track. So I'm just going to add a track. I'm just going to add another one anyway. And I'm going to add an action strip, and we're going for Suzanne bounce. And let's say we want her to, start flying and then bounce. So now what you can do, let me just close it here and open it in here. I think it's going to work a lot better. You can see that in the tutorial, that's also the way it was done. So I want them to blend in and out automatically. So I'm just going to tick that. And let's say the flying is a little on the slow side. I want to see if it is or not. So AV sync. Oh, that's the problem. Okay, never mind. It was muted and yeah, for some reason. See, now it's flying. Okay, so I just want to go back to the dope sheet. As you can see, it's no longer visible. There are no actions visible here because they've all been taken and, for lack of a better term, baked, just like in the tutorial mentioned. So what she does now is she's flying and bouncing. Awesome, just absolutely awesome. I think if you open the dope sheet with this one and you press tab on that one, yes, then you can edit it. So what you can do is you can just adjust the end frame. You can just adjust the end frame, and you can see that now there's still not enough length because it's super slow. But you can also make these run faster. You can make them repeat, all that kind of stuff under Action Clip. But yeah, that's it for this vlog. Have a great one, and God bless you.